Today we'll be sharing simple rules on how to address someone in Portugal without getting yourself into a tricky situation.
We're also going to talk about the Voce, that pronoun that some people think is only used in Brazil. It is used in Portugal, but it's a little bit of a tricky one. So let's do it.
The different ways of addressing someone in Portugal is a very complex topic. Even natives find it tricky, and often we can have discussions, heated discussions over this topic.
Não! Mas você quer...
And we just have to agree to disagree.
So we're going to talk about all those details. Well, it's a short video, but we're going to give you a little bit more detail. But at the end of it, we're also going to give you a kind of a rule of thumb. Something that if you're not sure how to address someone, well, this rule will definitely get you out of trouble, let's put it that way. But we're going to go from the
most familiar, intimate way of addressing someone to the most distant. So you have to think of it as like two lines, you know? So if you think of a horizontal line, that's distance, and as you get closer, you can address someone in a different way. And there's also the vertical line. So think of hierarchy, your position in relation to the other person, you know? How high are they in comparison to you? Are you equals? Are you superior to them, or are you inferior? Okay, so we'll start with the form tu. That's the most informal, familiar way of addressing somebody. And you don't actually have to say the pronoun, the word tu. So we'll use one example and apply that for all the different types of people that we could come across. We'll do it as if we're just talking to one person. So, and if we're just talking to a group of people, okay? So the plural way. And as I said, we started with tu. Let's say the example could be, do you want a cup of coffee? Okay, or would you like a cup of coffee? You'd say, queres café? Or tu queres café? So when would we use this kind of way of addressing someone? With relatives, you know, especially if they're the same age as you or younger.
Yeah, not every relative. Like you wouldn't use it with your granddad maybe, unless you had a very close relationship.
I personally do.
You do? I don't, for example.
My parents don't do it with my grandparents, but I actually do it with my grandparents.
Oh, okay.
If that makes sense, yeah.
So, as we're going to be looking at in a bit, this does depend on your social circle. It does depend on what kind of social class you find yourself in. But yeah, close family members, friends.
Children, even if they're not your family, they're just children. So it could be like even a teacher with her or his students at school, maybe from an early age, however, you know, old they start school, to up to maybe 16, their teachers might treat them or address them by the word tu, or as I said, just using the verb conjugated in a way that expresses that they're addressing them that way. And then you have Voce. This is the one that, you know, it's topic for discussion.
We had an interview with Marco Neves a few months ago. We'll put a link below, but in that discussion, he gave us an example of someone who, in one part of the country, Voce was viewed as just normal, that's fine, you can use it with people that, you know, and it's kind of formal. In other parts of the country, it's offensive for them, right?
Yeah.
It's not formal enough.
Generally, in the countryside, Voce is classed as a respectful way of addressing someone. And maybe in the cities, not so much. But it does depend. So I was saying that tu is for family. So Voce, I just want to use the verb as well. Você quer café? Or without Voce, you could just simply say quer café? Would you like a coffee? I personally use it with my mother-in-law. Okay, so I feel like I am being respectful, thinking about her age in relation to me. So it's not that we're not close, it's where I see her, okay?
Right, yeah, that makes sense.
Being older than I am, so...
So like earlier you were saying about the context of school. So this Voce is probably used a lot by the teacher addressing a student, perhaps older students, right?
Yeah, exactly. So maybe from the age of 15, 16 onwards. It shows that there's that is more in relation to proximity. There is a distance, you know, they're not close friends or family or anything like that, and there's that position. So you can see that Voce can be used from a superior to someone inferior. But as I said, I address my mother-in-law by Voce because I see her as superior when it comes to age.
Yeah.
So it can be tricky with Voce.
It's also, for example, in higher class family circles, they often, even though there is a great deal of intimacy between them, they do treat, I'm generalizing here, but you do see this a lot, they do treat each other with the Voce pronoun.
It's classed as an affectionate way, you know, from their point of view. But for me, it's it creates a distance, it creates a barrier if I was to address my mum that way, or my mum was to address me by Voce.
So it's kind of a middle ground, but it's a difficult one to, yeah.
Yeah, you can hear the expression sometimes, Voce estrebaria, which I can't translate estrebaria into English, I don't know the word, but that's where horses were kept.
It'll probably be somewhere in the screen.
Yeah, or on the description below. So people sometimes use that to say that they don't recommend using Voce. Don't use that with me. You should use it with people that handle animals, you know, so like lower classes. That's how they view it. So it's best not to use the word Voce, but as we said, later on we'll be looking into a way that you can use so you can always be safe.
Yeah. So the next one along, I guess, if you're going in terms of becoming a little bit more formal, is to use o senhor, a senhora, or even dona.
Yeah.
Dona is used a lot in Portugal. You probably hear that a lot. So for example, if you have a cleaner or a gardener that works in your house, then you'd probably use something like that. So Dona Isabel, often followed by the name. Okay.
Yeah. So again, here if this person is your gardener or your cleaner, they are inferior to you to a degree because they work for you. Mm-hmm. But there is that distance. They just work, the relationship is just work. So you should still address them in a respectful way.
Yeah.
And that could be Senhor Miguel, especially if they're older than you, right? Mm-hmm. So you could say Senhor or Senhor accompanied by the name. When it's people that you know and work for you and you know their name, then you should say Senhor Miguel, for example, or Senhora Maria. But it's not, I personally don't use Senhora that much. If I use Senhora, I use it without the name when I don't know someone and I want to be quite formal. So I'll say that, I'll go back to that in a second. So I would use Dona for a woman. Dona Maria.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Also, there's also an alternative here used in some parts of the country more than others, which is Menina. Menina, it's not used as much in continental Portugal, at least not in the whole of the country. Perhaps further north it is. And in most of the country, it is used, when it is used, is to address someone who's younger than you. But for example, I know that my family, half of my family is from the island of Madeira. And in there, Menina is used with women of all ages.
I think it's the same in Porto as well, which is interesting. I like it. Some people, they might see it as demeaning, but I think it's a quite nice way of, you know, approaching or talking to someone.
Yeah, so that's another like my mum uses it all the time when she goes to
a shop. Let's say she needs help with clothes.
Supermarket, whatever.
And she wants to grab their attention. When you want to do that, you simply just say, "Olha, se faz favor," and you ask the question. Excuse me, please, right? Without actually referring to them in any way. Mm-hmm. But your mum often uses Menina. Olha, desculpe, Menina.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Yeah. So in the sentence that Carla's been using from the start, you would say, a menina quer café, using always that quer, just the same as you would use with você. But it sounds a little bit more formal than the você, definitely.
Because of this word, menina, dona, senhora.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay? And this you would also use with acquaintances. Okay, people, again, you're not close to, but you know them. And as far as you know, you are equals.
You can also make this a little bit more formal, o senhor, a senhora, perhaps with specific professions. For example, if you go to the doctors, many Portuguese will say o senhor doutor. You could just say o doutor, but by saying o senhor doutor, a senhora doutora, or senhor engenheiro is another very common one in Portugal. It becomes a tiny little bit more formal, okay? So yeah, that's a very common one as well.
So you can use this Senhor Miguel, and you can also use it with the article. O Senhor Miguel. Senhor Miguel, quer café? O Senhor Miguel quer café? Okay, so there's
adding the article also adds a little bit extra formality.
Yeah.
You can see the amount of layers that we can go down here.
It changes the phrase a little bit.
As well,
O Senhor Miguel quer café? So question mark at the end. Or Senhor Miguel, comma, quer café? Okay. Again, and there was something else here that we wanted to mention was hierarchy, wasn't it? So your boss, you would call him by Senhor or his title, isn't it?
Yeah. Now, in between this adding of Senhor, Dona, and Menina, these titles that we've been mentioning, and the Voce, you could get something in between these two if you're not quite sure, right?
Yeah. So a little bit more formal than Voce, the word itself, and less formal than addressing by someone by Senhor or Dona. Would be just by addressing them by their name.
Right.
But keeping the verb in the same way. Miguel, quer café? Or Maria, quer café? So it shows still that there is a certain distance, or it shows a measure of respect. Although, again, we said it does depend on the social class. So upper classes might do that, and that actually means intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have friends in Portugal or relatives, ask them, how should you address them, okay? Because as I said, I address my mother-in-law, even though she told me to address her by tu, but by the time she's done it, it was too late. Years had gone by, so now I don't feel comfortable to do that. So I actually, for many years, I addressed her by Dona Ida, and she asked me to drop the Dona, so now I have, and I just say Ida, and sometimes I say Voce.
Right. So if senhor or senhora sounds a little bit too formal and they even cringe at it, which you sometimes get the vibe, right? And you know them by their name, just treat them use the same quer, so that second option that we looked at, but just use their name, and that becomes a little bit more comfortable for them and still maintains a level of formality. A Dona Ida, like Carla was saying.
Yeah, with Armando is the same thing. So Armando, I don't add a title.
That's my father-in-law, by the way.
So yeah. So your stepfather, my father-in-law.
Yeah, sorry.
So he, I once said, "Oh, Senhor Armando," but I actually was joking. I wasn't being serious. And he's like, "Senhor now." So he didn't want me to address him in that way.
Yeah.
So I just address him by his name, but still use the verb in the third person, singular. And I think the situation here is different. Our relationship is not the same as my relationship with your mum. Yeah. It's more distant. So it's not because I feel like he's higher, even though he's a bit older. It's because I feel there is a distance in our relationship.
You see the problem here. We're Portuguese, grown up in Portugal, and yet we're not the only ones. This is one aspect of the Portuguese language that is in flux, if you will. It's in movement, so to speak.
It's evolving, isn't it? It keeps changing.
Yeah, and so it depends on what like again, social circles, what kind of place and what kind of area in Portugal you live in. But we said at the beginning that there's a rule of thumb that you can use, and I use it, right, all the time. And that is, if you're not sure, you don't want to offend the person by using você or senhor,
or being too formal.
You don't want to use the tu, estás, or queres café, like we said from the example that Carla gave at the beginning. You don't want to offend them by being too informal. One thing you can do is simply use the verb from você, right, from that verb conjugation, but just use the verb without anything else.
Yeah, don't use the title, don't use the pronoun você, don't use the pronoun tu, just go straight into the verb, and you're safe for that.
So in this case, quer café, as simple as that. And you will not get into trouble, okay?
I don't think you shouldn't get into trouble anyway, because if people realize that you're not from Portugal, they understand. As we said, it's a complex topic even for us. So let alone for those learning the language, right?
Yeah.
And remember, languages are not just things that we speak. We feel them. So sometimes we're giving you an idea of when you should use você, when should you use senhor. But sometimes certain people, you just you feel, how you should address them. Oh no,
yeah.
I shouldn't. Senhor
You
is
get a
too
feeling
much.
for it,
Você is too rude, too informal. Maybe I should, So it's the more time you spend in Portugal and you have these conversations with Portuguese, the more it will help you, hopefully.
Generally speaking, now going into the plurals, it's much easier, right? Because in the majority, for most of the country, you do not have many options, right? You have vocês, and then there's only one conjugation as well of the verb. Vocês querem café? So, like I said, most of the country, that's all you're going to have to choose from. So whether it's a person that you feel very close to or somebody who you've never met in your life, then...
I think vocês is a little bit, if like a lady, let's say a waitress is serving us in a restaurant, So let's say it's a nice restaurant, a fancy restaurant, and she says, vocês querem alguma coisa? I would feel a bit uncomfortable. I would feel like vocês is too informal.
Right.
She would say os senhores, even though there's a group mixed, like there's females and males in this same group, she should use the masculine title. Os senhores já sabem o que vão querer, for example.
Yeah.
So,
no, that makes sense. Yeah.
So vocês is the same. Voce in the north of Portugal, it's still used, not widely, but it's still used, and that's the plural form of tu. Okay, as vocês is the plural of você, and Voce is the plural of tu. So you can see that these forms are actually a little bit more relaxed, a bit more informal. So if you want to be formal, you use os senhores or as senhoras if it's only girls.
And by the way, Voce, which is again that little option that is only used in some parts of the country, mainly the north, it would say quereis café. So the conjugation is different as well.
Yeah. So again, I think this could also happen. If you think that addressing someone by os senhores or as senhoras is too formal, it's not right for that group of people, yet you feel that you can't be that informal by just using vocês or vós, you could again just use the verb. Querem café. So, but use the verb in the plural form.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now, if you enjoyed this video, we actually have a 30-day plan that we created a few weeks ago for you to get started with Portuguese. Now, expectations, you won't learn to speak fluently in Portuguese within 30 days, but it'll definitely give you a bit of a kickstart to the language, and it's free. So they will be somewhere on the screen or in the description below, somewhere like that.
See you again soon.
Okay, and if you like it, subscribe and like the video. Okay, ciao.